All right, so this lecture will cover finding and evaluating sources. And most of your sources should, for this paper, be coming from library resources, primarily the article databases, from academic journals, potentially from books, but more than likely I expect that most of these will be from academic journals. And so EBSCO is the primary source that you should use. And let me just show you how to access it. To pause my share. Okay, so this is the library webpage. If you go to the UVA-wise library, this is what it should look like. Under databases, there's a couple, but again, EBSCO is probably most likely what you will use. If you are at home, it will ask you to log in. So you'll need to log in using your UVA-wise username and password. EBSCO host web is what you want to access. There's a bunch of different databases. Honestly, you can see there's some that are kind of related. There's child development and adolescent studies, some other ones that may be relevant depending on your topic. But honestly, the one that I searched that just kind of covers everything is the psychology and behavioral sciences. So I would expect that probably anything in that child and adolescent one will also be in here. So I would check the psychology and behavioral sciences collection and then go all the way down to the bottom and continue. And so this is what the basic search function for EBSCO looks like. So if you have a specific article you're looking for, you might look for the search by the author or potentially the year. For example, I'll just use one of mine because I can think of it off the top of my head. So I know the authors for this. So I'm going to list the field as author, do a search, and we'll see if it shows up. Okay, so here's the article, Shell and Abshire from 2019. Okay, so if you look at this, the full text of this is available. You always want to have your article in PDF. That's really important because then you can save it. I'm going to ask you to submit copies of your articles as PDFs. And so you need to have them. So once you get to the PDF, you make sure it's the full text of the article. This is what you want for your articles. You can download them. You can print them and then print it as a PDF. But you want to have it saved somewhere on your computer or save it to Box. Saving the EBSCO link does not work. You can create an account in EBSCO and save it, but it tends to create issues. You want to save the actual PDF, have it in a file that you can access even without internet access or even if you can't get on EBSCO. So please make sure that all of your articles, you have the full text saved as PDF. Okay. So if we go back to our results list, let me just show you, let's do a new search. Okay, so we're done with this one. A couple other features that I want you to show you. And again, select a field is the default. If you're just doing keywords, it's fine to use that. I want to bring your attention to this and function because you can also change that to or not. You probably won't use not, but let's say I'm doing a paper on alcoholism and depression. I might search alcoholism as one of my keywords anywhere in there and depression as my other. If I keep and in here, it is going to find articles that have the word alcoholism anywhere in the paper, alcoholism and depression anywhere in the paper. And so while we search, we've got 1,084 results. This is a lot. We could narrow our search down. We could limit it to full text. That's one way to narrow it. We could limit the publication date. We could, let's see. So there's some subject things that you could list it. You could also add another keyword. So maybe I want to focus on this in adolescence. So I could add another keyword and search again. So I go from 1,084 to 67 articles. So this is certainly narrowing it down. This is certainly a key that a strategy that you will definitely use. Let's clear our search history and try again. And let me just show you what the OR function looks like. So I might say, well, we might call it alcohol abuse instead of alcoholism. So I want to see, I'm going to look for alcoholism or alcohol abuse. Okay, so now I'm looking for any article that has either the keyword alcohol, either the word alcoholism or alcohol abuse somewhere in the article. This is going to give me a huge number of hits, 14,000. Obviously, you're not going to go through them all, but maybe I'll add in depression. So this is going to give me articles that use either alcoholism or alcohol abuse. So they have one of these two words and also use the word depression. And you can see we've got 11,000. So you might use or if you have a couple of different ways that you might share your or a couple of different terms that might be keywords, that might be useful for you. And again, you want to look for articles that have the PDF full text. The HTML full text can get it to you. You could print it as a PDF, but certainly PDF full text is the most useful. And it looks like a lot of these do. When we click on the article in EBSCO, you can see the authors, you can see the source, the date, the volume, page numbers. This is all information that should be on the PDF itself, but is also useful in making your references. You can read the abstract to get a sense of if the article is actually related. The DOI is another thing you'll need in the references. And then here on the left, you'll see the PDF. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. All right. Other things that you might check are making sure that it's peer reviewed. And I showed you how to modify your search results. So this is, again, you've seen this. This is what it looks like when you come up with an article. And again, we've got the full text here and all of the information. There's a couple of different ways that you might save it as a PDF depending on your version of Adobe, but probably there's like a little floppy disk or something that you'll use to save it. Okay, so in terms of things to think about when you're conducting a literature search, always save the article as a PDF and save it somewhere where you can find it. Don't just save it in the automatic downloads file, create a file somewhere. Now, another really important part is to save it as something that will help you identify it. Too often I see students saving articles as just random things. The system that I would recommend you use is you use the first author's last name, the second author's last name, the year, and then a few keywords from the title. That way you have the most pertinent information in the file name so that you can kind of scan through and look for it. So this is an example, Barron and Dolan, 13, online choices, multiple memories. Okay, so these are some of the keywords, has something to do with being online, multiple choice and memories. Okay, so looking at that really quickly, if all I have is the citation of Barron et al. 13, I can find the article. If I know it had something to do with online and memory, I can also find the article. So this is how you should save your articles. And again, don't rely on EBSCO to save them for you. The links tend to not work. Sometimes you can't remember the search terms that you used. If you just say, oh, well, I'll just search it again, download the PDF. It's the only way to guarantee that you'll continue to be able to access the article. Okay, other places that you might find sources. If you are struggling to find empirical articles, you might look at textbooks from your classes as a starting point. The internet, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but again, as a starting point and using it with caution. Some of the other article databases that Shannon Steffi will talk about in the library presentation. Another really important source is the reference list of relevant articles. So let's say you find one article that is just absolutely perfect. It's exactly what you want to talk about and you can't find much else. Look at the back of that article and see who they've cited, because if their article is exactly what you want to talk about, they probably have other relevant sources. Okay, so this is just a little practice. What I'd like you to do is get on EBSCO. in the psychological and behavioral sciences collection and see if you can find this article. So the information I've given you is the author's names and the year of publication, so you can use those to search. And I would like you to correctly cite the article in APA format, read the abstract, and then paraphrase the study in your own words. So write 1 or 2 sentences that summarizes what the study was about without plagiarism, and then save a PDF copy of the article and practice putting it on Box. Okay. So you can pause this video and go ahead and try to do this now. Make sure that you have all of these skills. And then this is just the answer to that. I've got the citation here for you. This is one potential way of describing this. And then also go back and look and make sure that you can find where you save the PDF. Okay. Once you have sources, you need to kind of think about how high quality they are. So one distinction to make is primary versus secondary literature. So primary literature is a publication of the investigator's own research. If I write an article and I publish it, I'm going to describe exactly what I did. That's primary literature. Secondary literature is based on primary research, but it used multiple primary sources combined in new ways. So you are essentially doing a secondary research paper, right? You're not going to be conducting research on your own, but you're going to be reading primary literature and using it to support some kind of argument. Another really important distinction that you need to be able to make is popular versus scholarly articles, okay? You need to be using scholarly articles here, and you should be able to identify the difference. So some differences between popular and scholarly articles. Who wrote it? So in popular articles, the author is going to be a journalist or somebody with an opinion, where in scholarly articles, the author is going to be the scientist who conducted the research. The audience is also different, right? So in a popular article, the audience is someone who doesn't have any specific knowledge. They're just reading kind of what's interesting to them. As opposed to in a scholarly article, the audience is someone who probably has at least some degree of technical and specific skills. The editorial process is also different. So with popular articles, what they're thinking about is what's going to sell the most magazines, what's going to get the most views or the most clicks. Whereas in scholarly articles, we go through this process of peer review. And what this means is when an author submits their manuscript, it gets sent out anonymously to other scientists who read it and evaluate it based on kind of the scientific merit. And so that's a really important thing to think about and to be looking for. You want to make sure that all of your sources are peer reviewed, which all academic sources should be. Additional features, so scientific articles typically include an abstract. They normally have tables and figures and have methods and results and references sections. And popular articles don't necessarily have these. So you want to stay away from popular articles. They're not complete. They're often biased based on their audience or kind of trying to sell things. So you need to avoid those for this paper. Okay. You shouldn't really be using internet sources for this paper, but you may use them as a very early starting point, and you're probably going to encounter them in other classes and in other contexts. So I just want to kind of give you some things to think about as you're evaluating internet sources. So one is think about the accuracy. So is this source consistent with other sources? Do they have references listed? Is it accessible? Have they met basic grammatical standards, or are there typos all over it, right? These might be red flags. This is probably not a great source. Authority. So thinking about who takes credit for the article. Does the author have appropriate and relevant credentials? Do they have contact information? If it's written by an anonymous person, you might be a little more skeptical than if it's a popular article or an internet blog or something, but that's written by a scientist with their contact information and credentials. Another thing to think about is objectivity or advocacy. So objectivity tells you about kind of the type or purpose of the site, the domain name, and you want to think about, could the purpose affect what is included versus excluded? And does it present different perspective, right? So if you are going to vaccinesareterrible.com, it's probably going to tell you that you're probably not going to get objective information about vaccines because they're clearly advocating for a specific side. In contrast, if you're looking at the CDC website, you're much more likely to get objective information. Currency is also important. So when was the information originally written? Has it been updated? Are the links current and working? If it was last edited in 2005 and all the links are dead, probably another sign that's probably not a great source. And then finally, coverage. Is the information fair and comprehensive? Do they present multiple sides? How do they treat each side? And is there kind of outside support for the ideas? So these are all things to be thinking about as you're evaluating internet sources. Again, these really aren't appropriate sources for this paper. You want to use academic sources instead, but you may come across them, and it's important for you to kind of have some ideas of what you need to be looking at. Okay, so that is it.